Hi, my name is Gerhard Gschwandtner, and welcome to the Sales Up Shop. We are in Fredericksburg, Virginia.
I'm Anthony Iannarino. I'm in Columbus, Ohio.
Ira Koretsky, Washington, D.C.
And I'm Ashleigh Hoult, and I'm from the Mornington Peninsula in Melbourne, Australia.
Welcome, everybody. Why don't we start with the first clip?
President, I want to raise an issue that I think has been lurking out there for 2 or 3 weeks and cast it specifically in national security terms. You already are the oldest president in history, and some of your staff say you were tired after your most recent encounter with Mr. Mondale. I recall yet that President Kennedy had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances?
Not at all, Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
Ira, you selected that clip. What made you choose that, and what is the point that you're trying to make?
There's 2 reasons that I selected it. One is that I think it transcends any age. And second, it really illustrates the power of words and preparation. Ronald Reagan, I think we can all agree, is a master orator. What people don't realize is that there was a huge debate about his age. And it was really just 4 years difference. He was 72, Mondale was 68. So that's why Mondale was so caught off guard. And if you look at it and you play that clip just of Mondale laughing, his entire body language was absolute embarrassment. And he's been quoted as saying that he thinks that's one of the reasons that he lost. And I just think that Reagan was masterful in how he redirected the whole issue. And it's all about practice and resonance. And I just think he nailed it.
Anthony.
I've always seen that clip and people show it under the idea that it was ad-libbed and it was improv and Reagan had this line, but I think Ira's right. This was well rehearsed. Somebody in his group, either him, because Reagan did have a great sense of humor, or his staff came up with this and they said, you know the question's going to come up. What are we going to say to diffuse it? And he handled it brilliantly and he completely pulled it away with a sense of humor.
Ashleigh.
I was so excited when this clip was featured. You know, as you know, Gerard, with my acting background, Ronald Reagan is, you know, a role model for me. I think he's known, the general consensus is that he was one of the West's best communicators of all time. And I think that the reason that he was able to achieve this was because he was a true storyteller. And I do agree, I think it was very well rehearsed because he knew how to, you know, answer every question, and his confidence just shone through in the way that he presented himself.
Let's move on and play the next clip.
I'm an economist. I do dismal. End of the day, it's ready for dismal remarks. I only want to talk to those of you who want a great career. I know some of you have already decided you want a good career. You're going to fail too, because, goodness, you're all cheery about failing. Canadian group, undoubtedly. Those trying to have good careers are going to fail because really good jobs are now disappearing. There are great jobs and great careers, and then there are the high workload, high stress, blood-sucking, soul-destroying kinds of jobs, and practically nothing in between. So the people looking for good jobs are going to fail. I want to talk about those looking for great jobs, great careers, and why you're going to fail. First reason is that no matter how many times people tell you, if you want a great career, you have to pursue your passion, you have to pursue your dreams, you have to pursue the greatest fascination in your life. You hear it again and again, and then you decide not to do it.
Was Larry persuasive?
For me, Larry Smith was very engaging. The reason that I found it was that way was I believe he's a very animated character. I think you found that he got very much into the role that he was trying to play. When he was delivering his speech, at times he was very fast-paced, and then he slowed it down. And you saw that he did that very well at the times that he needed to impact on the audience. So, for example, at the very end, when he was, talking about the fact that you know, we're ultimately going to fail unless, and he pauses. And I think that had a really dramatic effect on the audience. So I think my general feedback about Larry Smith's performance is that it was very impactful. I think it was very engaging. Yeah, I liked it.
Anthony, thank you.
I think he waded into it a little bit. You know, I want to talk about this, and I would have rather seen him open big and just say, you're not going to have a great career, and just go ahead and hit you with the hard opening so he gets your attention. And then he does what I call, you know, the state fair or the carnival duck. You know, so there's a little game at the carnival. You pay $2 and the duck goes to one side and you shoot it and the duck turns around and comes back, or you spray water into it, right, to turn him around. So he's going ding, 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 back and forth across the stage. And I think it means he's uncomfortable as a speaker, that he hasn't picked a spot where he speaks directly to some people in the audience and then moves to another spot if that's what he wants to do. And I think it's just being uncomfortable in that presence. But as a speaker, I think he'd be more persuasive if he slowed down, picked the spot, and maybe took the speed back just a hair. I'll leave it to Ira to say more about that. But
well, I agree with both Ashleigh and Anthony. I'm not sure he connected in the beginning. I think you had to wait for probably 4 or 5 minutes into the presentation before you got beyond his carnival of going back and forth. What Anthony said, he was like banging us with a hammer, the audience. Now I agree, one of the nice ways to start a presentation in a story is about being startling and different, and there is no question that the audience paid attention, and whatever they were doing, they stopped looking at their smartphones and they were looking up and paying attention to this presenter. And then the third thing is meaning. Did it have a lot of meaning? Was it in depth? And again, it not in that first setup. And I just didn't get it. And I really think that he needs to retool how he opens it and how he articulates it for me to have meaning.
So let's play one more clip and then put together and talk about what we really should do, what we learned from each one of those presentations.
Before getting started, how many of you have heard of Zappos prior to this? And how many of you have actually shopped with us before? Wow, very cool. So normally when I do the survey to a random group of people, the ratio is actually about 2 to 1 women to men. And a lot of women I've asked, or men that I ask, say they haven't personally shopped from us, but their wife or significant other has, and a lot of times it's the significant other buying for the guy. And I was actually giving a tour in Las Vegas a few years ago to an executive from one of the major record labels. And I happened to be giving the tour. And I asked him the exact same question, had he shopped from us before? And he said no, he hadn't, but he suspects his wife has, because these white boxes would show up on his doorstep and then they'd disappear, and he didn't know what was going on. Didn't know if she was buying them or exchanging them, returning them. And every time he asked his wife, she would just change the subject or refuse to answer him. And so, you know, giving the tour, downstairs is the merchandising area, and then we walk upstairs to our customer loyalty team, which is our name for our call center. And as we're walking through, like, I'm starting to explain stuff and then turn around and he's gone. And I'm like, what happened? And I find out that he actually went down one of the aisles and sat down next to one of our reps and forced her to pull up his wife's account. And so, and as it turned out, he discovered she had spent over $62,000 in her lifetime. So, yeah.
So I show this one for 2 reasons. One, to illustrate you can be genuine, authentic, no matter where you are, and I think Tony is absolute epitome of this. The illustrative part about storytelling is that I don't think this is a strong start. Now, some people might argue that it is because he got the audience engaged, they're listening and they're laughing. What they're not analyzing is that story just sits there. It's not connected. And that's the part that's missing.
Anthony, do you agree?
I agree completely. I found a couple other things. Tony's not a professional speaker. I hate opening small, and I especially hate opening with a question of the audience. I don't think it's a great opening. I don't think it does a lot to connect, and I would rather see a bigger opening about what you're going to challenge somebody to think about, or something of that nature. I also think because he's Tony from Zappos and he's got this story, he's got a lot of confidence to lean on the fact that he's Tony and he's got time and he can riff and he can play. I do think that there's a responsibility to rehearse. And if he were working with somebody like Ira, I'm sure he'd have a bigger story at the beginning, a story that deeply connected to the brand. And I saw the title of the presentation as Delivering Happiness. The $62,000 indicates that there's some level of happiness being created for people with $62,000, but he generates happiness for people that don't have $62,000 as well. And I might have found a different story to open with if I were him.
I'd like to get your feedback, Ashleigh, on his body language. How would you describe his body language, and how would you coach him to do better?
Sure, that's a great question. I think from watching it, how should I put it? I almost perceived it like he didn't really care. It wasn't, like he was really present, as in he kind of used his hands like this a lot, kind of like being a bit blasé. I think that's the word that I'm looking for. I think that if I was coaching him in terms of body language, I would definitely be telling him to, be reaching out to the audience a lot more. To not be pacing so much. A little bit like the clip we were talking about earlier, where you kind of pick a few people and really engage them. I think he kind of walked around a lot and was a little bit blasé with the hand movements as well.
All right, I'd like to play a clip that we haven't prepared for him, and I want you to continue to comment on the body language, okay?
I love nonprofits and I love philanthropy. Philanthropy is the best drug I ever took. Philanthropy is the best drug I ever took. Nothing makes me feel so good as when we do something philanthropic, and it's in our culture. It was a great decision. But this innovation, whether it was the business model, whether it was the technology model, or maybe even it was the philanthropy model, this was probably part of something much bigger, more exciting. It's a part of this post-PC revolution that is going on. Our industry is constantly evolving and moving forward, constantly getting lower cost and easier to use. And you can see it today, the end of Wintel. We've moved from the mainframe, we moved to client-server computing, and here we are in this beautiful new space now with the cloud, with wireless networks, and all these new devices. And it could be a mobile device, it could be one of these things, and it's kind of interesting. But now when I look up there and I see that slide, I'm like, you know what? Probably put a refrigerator up there too, put a camera up there too, put a dishwasher up there too, right? Because that's the world that we're in. Because we are moving into this Internet of Things. Now I'm on the board of Cisco Systems. We call it the Internet of Everything, and the Internet of Things. It's just the Internet. It's just the Internet, and it's this next huge wave of the Internet that's happening where we're moving from not having thousands of computers or millions of computers, but to billions of computers and billions of devices, and that everything is getting connected. But all of these things are taking us to a clear place, and that is to a customer revolution.
The reason I wanted to play that is it's such a stark contrast to Tony Hsieh. Tony has a sort of, as Ashleigh said, a blasé attitude, whereas Marc Benioff really takes a bubble bath with the audience. Ashleigh, tell us your impression of Marc Benioff.
Yeah, well, I think, like you said, having a bubble bath with the audience, he really did kind of take that message to the next level by actually carrying out the action of getting amongst his customers, so to speak. So I think, the body language said it all. It was about, demonstrating that he was one of them, that he was really understanding them. He was talking directly to them. And I think that his body language really delivered the message a lot stronger than the last clip, that was for sure.
Anthony.
I hate it. I hate him being in the audience. It's distracting, and if I'm sitting in front of him, I don't want to turn my head, and he's not up on the screen. The screen's got graphic animations of computers, which I'm not interested in. I'm interested in hearing the speaker and seeing his face. His body language is good, though. It's clear that he's confident. It's an interesting contrast because Tony sold Zappos for $850 million, and he doesn't look like he has really a concern to impress anybody at that point, and rightfully so. Benioff is probably indebted they're upside down on financials, and he's got to play a big confidence game, and he's walking around looking very confident. He's in a big suit, he's got the big hand gestures, and he's selling that thing, baby, and he's got to sell it because he's got a lot of money to come up with, and he's still right in the middle of his game. I think that Salesforce is a great platform, and they're doing wonderful, but it's a big game to play. when you're trying to make money at that level.
I am not a fan of integrating yourself in bubbling bath in the audience. To me, if he wants to be one of them, I would drop the tie. And I would be more comfortable. His hand gestures are powerful gestures in and of themselves, yes. But to me, if he wants to be more of a us people, of an audience, I wouldn't use those kind of gestures. I would engage myself. I mean, I almost would think of that should be right out of the gate as a story, or get right to your point faster. I'm not a fan of how it was started.
So let's refocus and let's come up with about 10 tips that we want to pass on and share with our audience on how to deliver a great speech. Ira, why don't you start with the first 3 rules?
The first one, to me, is know your audience. Number 2, use words that are going to resonate with them, and the words are part of the story. And then third is tell a story right up front that they're going to really connect to the heart, to the brain, so that you can combine business and storytelling together, so it's business storytelling.
Great. Ashleigh?
Okay, well, I would say my first tip would definitely be to practice. Preparation is key. And I think in all situations, in a sense, we're telling stories. And I think, like Ira said, we've got to know our audience, and we should be able to come up with the kinds of responses we think we're going to get, and then practice the delivery after that. What are our answers going to be? Second to that, I would say be personable. Smile. I think smiling is key. And when we, looked at the clip from Ronald Reagan, you watch the fact that, in most cases he was smiling, and that really brought across that confidence. And thirdly, I think body language is everything. So be careful with the way that you present yourself, and think about or visualize the kind of person that you want to be perceived as. And, think about the kind of body language that person would have.
Thank you. Hey.
We're talking to salespeople here, so the first thing I would say is join Toastmasters. Number 2, I'm good at riffing, but that's no reason not to prepare. You should write your speech. If you're going to give a 1-hour keynote, you should have a 1-hour written keynote. Whether you use everything in that keynote verbatim as you wrote it, or whether you pick things out of the audience and things that have happened while you've been sitting there to pull in, it doesn't matter. I think it's the fact of writing it and saying, I'm going to make choices about what I say and what I don't say here, that really allows you to be a better speaker. And then finally, the last thing is open big. I think it's terrible when people wade into a speech far back. Start right now. What do you want me to know? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? And give me that call to action. What are we doing here so I know where I am?
Well, thank you, Anthony. I'd like to add 3 quick things. One is a quote from Robert Key, is a screenwriter, and he says, stories are equipment for living. What you want to balance in your presentation is 2 things. It's logic and emotion. And as Zig Ziglar once said, logic makes people think, but emotions make people act. And the emotion that Ronald Reagan evoked with a little humorous line in a presidential debate won him the presidency. And I think the third thing is to create integration between yourself, your message, and your audience. And close with a call to action.
Ira, did you see the Billy Joel at Vanderbilt clip?
No, I didn't. You'll have to send that to me, please.
Billy Joel's at Vanderbilt, and he's giving a storytelling concert. So he's playing the piano, and he's telling stories about the songs. Well, some kid raises his hand and said, I'm a pianist. Can I come up and accompany you on a song? And Billy Joel says yes, and lets him come up and do New York State of Mind.
New York State of Mind. I've been very fortunate. I was able to play with Richie Canada many times in New York City, and I was wondering if I could play with you. I would come with you, Okay.
state of mind.
Fantastic. I've loved watching all the clips.
Thank you, Ashleigh, for getting up at an insane hour. And thank you, Ira, for providing the clips. And Anthony, thank you for sharing all your brilliance.